I would like to welcome our speaker for today, Mel Hovarth Lucid. She is doing part one of her talk, The Wisdom of Spring. And in June, she will be doing part two of her talk, The Wisdom of Summer. To introduce Mel, even though she has been with us many, many times, within her work of community development, volunteer engagement, facilitation, coaching, and event planning, she seeks to connect, empower, and engage others in this transformative work. When she is not working, you might find her at the dog park with her best pal, Walter. She is a creative person who enjoys singing, painting, art, journaling, writing, yoga, and deep conversations that challenges her to think in new and expansive ways. And that's one of the components that we love about Mel, is she challenges us to think in new and expansive ways. Please welcome Mel.
Good morning, everyone. Alrighty, so this is part one of 4 parts. And when Cheryl and I talked about imagining for this year, what I might contribute as a speaker, for me, it was drawing back and reconnecting or reminding us of how our faith is so interwoven with nature, how the two are intrinsically linked, and how important it is for us to not miss the wisdom of the seasons, the wisdom of the elements, the wisdom of nature within our spirituality. And so we're coming up to the shifting from winter to spring. And so we're going to start with exploring just a little micro dose of the wisdom of spring, with the hope that you'll take this seedling of an idea and practice in your own life what the wisdom of spring is teaching you. There's a quote that says, "All journeys have secret destinations for which the traveler is unaware." And that's Martin Berber who says that. And for me in my own life, I have noticed that there's been many times where I've planted seeds of intention, and I've thought that my hope was something. And after I've lived that seed of intention and trusted and taken that one step, the unfolding has been different, bigger, juicier, met in a way that I couldn't have imagined, challenging roadblocks, different things like that come up through that practice of being willing to take the first step. And so those secret destinations are what remind us to stay curious and open and noticing, and within that faith of valuing the journey, valuing the climb, valuing the living, the space in between. And for me, this also means going back to looking at valuing of all the things. And so when I think about the wisdom of spring, it's valuing the rain, it's valuing the cold, the quiet, it's valuing the subtle. And sometimes when you are in a dark place, you think you've been buried, but actually you've been planted. And that, for me, drives into that orientation of how we experience what we're experiencing. And so I was talking a moment ago about the subtle, those times when nothing seems to be moving in our lives, and we appear to be still or stagnant, and we may experience it as stillness or stagnation, and both of those could be true, which is part of why Unity dives so deeply into mindset and experience, because our orientation with our experience, our mindset with our experience matters. And so I'm drawn to the story of my son, who's now almost 18, and he would have been under 10 at the time. And we went for a walk in Laurel Creek Conservation Area, and he had been attending an outdoor school for several years. And in that outdoor school, they use grounding techniques to enhance or increase or tune back into the senses, into hearing, into seeing, into feeling, into what we notice, into the smells of nature, back into our body as this experience, this adventure suit for the experience of life. And so we were in the forest, and he and I stop at the edge of this maybe pine treed area, we'll call it. And I went to walk in, and he said, "Wait." And there was such an urgency to his voice. And I remember he had little red mittens on, and he fell to his hands and knees, and he moved the snow aside, and he revealed underneath. And underneath, he says, "Look, it's all the babies growing." And we stopped and we slowed down and we looked, and there, under the seeming dark, cold death of winter, the snow, was all this growing, all these seeds and potential, and what a wise little one he was to tune back into all the things happening under the surface. And likewise with ourselves, we oftentimes measure things by how they manifest outwardly. And yet there's this understanding that we first have had to, everything is created twice, is one of the unity connectors. And this is the idea that we have thought it first, we've patterned it, and then it comes out into the world. And so there's times when I would say emotionally, inwardly, I'm climbing the Alps. Outwardly, I'm appearing to be doing nothing. And those times were meant to honor that inner journey, and to continue to practice those supportive practices, those rituals that grow and connect us to ourselves, to our divinity, to one another, to the world. Our practices, whether we're seeing in the moment fruits from those or not, that is the seed planting that becomes effortless. So it's not about the crop that we would yield, it is about the practice of planting and nourishing the seeds. I've talked a little bit before about Buddhist ideas, and I want to draw them back in. I'm going to actually draw one per season. And there's, in Buddhism, there's the easy understanding of opposite. So with love, oftentimes we might think hate is the opposite. The suggestion is that indifference would be more opposite. But there's something called the near enemy. And the near enemy masquerades as the thing that we are looking for. So say in this case, we are cultivating an experience of love, but attachment becomes so close to love that the two become confused. And so attachment masquerades as love. It says, I will love this person because I need them, or I'll love you if you'll love me back. I'll love you, but only if you will be the way that I want. And in Buddhism, this near enemy is that this isn't love at all. It's attachment, and attachment is rigid. It's very different from love. And so as we start to grow our seeds and move through this deepening and maturing of our spiritual practice, part of that is to move back into a place of love, not as an emotion, but love as a conscious state of being, seeing. So love as the way for which we approach ourselves and one another. And to be quite frank with you, this is a practice that I'm starting to notice I could spend the rest of this life and 5 lifetimes after and 15 lifetimes after that, simply on this one practice. And an example I have of this that's a little bit more distant and less personal is a movement of paying it forward. And the movement of paying it forward, I've experienced it a few different ways. I might be at a cafe and the person in front of me pays for my order. I might be in a drive-through, same thing. I've been in a grocery store and this has happened. And I noticed something about the quality of the same experience through different people. So through receiving that act of generosity, I've noticed that I've experienced it different. And one of my most favorite times of experiencing that was being in a drive-through line where the person in front of me paid, and I noticed as they were leaving, they sent a wave at the window and they were gone. And I get up to the window and I'm told, hey, your order's already paid for. And I noticed how powerful that was, that the person was simply offering. They didn't know how it would land. They did not look for a specific response from me. They did not do anything. They simply offered. And I would suggest that that was more of a being love, being generous to be generous, and that quality sat different with me. I had a time in the grocery store where the same thing happened, where the person in front of me, or sorry, the person behind me said, I want to pay for your groceries. And what I was met with was the desire from the person. They said to me, had said thank you, and then they went to pay, and they said again to me, "Are you going to say thank you?" And what I noticed was when we do something for something, that becomes business, not kindness. And when we do something to get or elicit a response back from somebody else, we are now attached to the response that somebody's giving, not the way of being and seeing that has us walking in our own shoes, navigating from a place of power and self. It has an attachment to an external source. And so it is noticing those times for which we do something for something or to avoid something. And when I look at attachment and I look at the quality of attachment, oftentimes underneath attachment is fear. And so fear for me is when we stop moving from a place of honoring self and respecting self, and we start moving into this place of doing something to get something. And I also want to look at the flip side of that coin, which is doing something to avoid something. My youngest the other day was playing a card game with their dad and their sister, and they were miserable playing the entire game. And I left it alone, and their dad mentioned something to me about it. And the next morning I said to them, hey, what was that about? I heard that was a really emotional game of cards, and what was going on for you? And what they said was, I didn't really want to play, but I was afraid that they would be mad at me if I didn't play. And so their tactic or their approach was, I'm going to do something I don't want to do, and I'm going to do it miserably. And so we were able to workshop through that and talk about, why our yeses, I talked about consent the last time I was here, why our yeses are so important and our nos are so important, so that we actually are acting from this place of love as a conscious way of being and doing and acting, rather than this deceptive sort of near enemy, which is oftentimes animated fear of loss, fear of hurting somebody, fear of rejection, fear of abandonment, fear of not being good enough, fear. So when I think about us as seeds, and there's darkness around us right now, and we're not sure if we're growing or dying or what is just going on right now, I want to invite in this idea of self-love. And I really valued this definition. Self-love means placing a high value on the well-being and happiness of oneself. Self-love means taking care of yourself and not sacrificing your well-being for the sake of others. And when I sit with this idea of self-love, I know that for me growing up, I was taught that self-love, as described here, was selfish, and that my sense of self would come from service to others. And what I'm noticing is that the best service I have to others is to practice the state of conscious being love, and that is where the flow and abundance comes from, because it isn't about a specific act, and it isn't motivated from fear or attachment, where the measurement of love becomes how somebody responds to it, receives it, or holds it. It becomes my inner state. And so I narrowed it down to 3 different ideas of self-love. The first one is adopting a mindset of slowly and gently. In a world of instant gratification, in a world of quantity over quality, in a world that is about exhaustion as a status symbol and what we do as a measure of our worth, bringing back in the idea of meditation and breath slowly and gently, and noticing the value of time, the value of space, the value of subtle, the value of reflection. And that we not only start to apply that inward, but as we apply that inward, we start to shine that outward. And we become slower to anger, slower to expectations. And we become more aware of our own inner motivation. We become more aware of our inner meaning. And in that, there becomes this exploration that's rich and deep that allows us to connect to others by connecting back in to ourselves. The second one I want to highlight today is the idea of healthy practices repeated. And this one, oftentimes I think kicks most of us in the rear end. But what I've noticed is that with this idea of practice, not perfection, and practice is repeated even if we're in this dark place and we're unsure whether we're dying or being born, right? Am I being planted or am I dying? I'm not even sure. That we have practices such as meditation, such as prayer, such as giving our bodies nourishment, such as giving our bodies movement in a way that feels healing, such as connecting with others in a way that grows us, that nourishes us. And sometimes I've resisted reaching out to a friend to talk, and I've noticed those are the times when I've actually required that most, or I've resisted nourishing my body. And one of the narratives that I hear more and more that I'm starting to hear differently is this idea of when we say to ourselves, I just need to give myself a swift kick in the rear end. I just need to get myself going. And it's almost as though we've been conditioned to be moved by fear. And so we've created a world for which fear motivates us. And the healthy practices repeated for me is like the precursor to being able to actually feel what self-love feels like, giving to myself the things for which I need to grow. So at my healthiest point, those things that I know are healing and nourishing for me, that at the point when I'm most disoriented, that I can draw on those practices and practice them, whether I'm noticing something external from those practices or not. The other piece with prayer and meditation that I notice comes up for me is another Buddhist idea of the witness. And when we take time to breathe, to center ourselves, to recenter ourselves, because that's not a static thing. That is a continual practice. We start to come back to the place of watching and noticing. And rather than being reactors in our lives, we become actors. We become animations of love, of the things that we want to nourish in our lives. But this place of witnessing ourselves means we have to be willing to look. We have to be willing to see the value in the rain as much as the sunshine, to recognize that plants literally grow in dirt, that manure is spread on fields for which we want to get a crop to grow healthy and strong. So what about that? What about our relationship with the struggle in our lives? And pushing through the dirt is what allows that plant, that tree, those roots to grow strong, to reach down as much as reaching up, to reach in while reaching out. And then the last one is recommitting to self. And there is a book called The 7 Secrets to Happy, Healthy Relationships. And in this book, they start off with a core foundational piece called commitment. And what they detail in that book is quite simple. When we move into relationship with one another, and this does not necessarily have to be romantic relationship, this can also be friendships and work relationships. Oftentimes what we do is we commit to getting to know what the other person likes, how they feel loved, what we need to do in order to receive and get our needs met. And the suggestion is that we actually move back into a place of committing to self, committing to knowing ourselves, our likes, our wants, our needs, our desires, committing to expressing and sharing those, and committing to creating space for others to come out as who they are, and to create space for change, growth, evolution within that. And that idea of committing back to self becomes a powerful shift in how we move forward, because we start to create room to walk in our own shoes and to walk with others in their shoes without confusing whose shoes are walking. That there's room for all of us to show up and be in our perfect imperfection, wholeness. So that idea of recommitting back to self, how do I want to grow these seeds that are inside me? How committed am I to exploring and being a conscious expression of love in my life? Am I willing to look at all those things that I consider to be desirable or undesirable within myself? And to even live that question, what is my center? So I want to take us into a time of meditation. I'm going to stop sharing and I'm going to turn off my camera, invite you to go inward. Inviting you to go inward to yourself. To open your ears to reaching outward. Not only listening to my voice, but listening to the sounds and the silence that exist around you and within you. To open our spiritual eye, to remember our birthright, to tap into divinity that's within us, that's around us, to see from eyes of possibility, to breathe in air, to allow that air to nourish our bodies, to feel the temperature around us, to imagine cultivating warmth within. This poem is called Divine Dance. It'll be followed by about a minute or so of silence. Center me in to the breath that is fire, to the passion of life, to my pure want and desire. Center me in to the dance of divine, to the quality of thine in me. Center me in to the waves on the water, to the change of life, and to the change of mind, of heart. Center me into the circle of love and the people who created it, and hearts open wide. Center me in to the depth of my being, eyes without blinders for all the unseen seeing. Center me in to the possibilities that exist, to the multiplicity that is me, to the many paths I walk. Center me in to the sound of my own heart beating, repeating, like a song my soul could sing by heart. Center me into the edge of existence, determined persistence, unquenchable desire to learn. Center me in to the place only I can go within myself, like a blooming center of a risky rose. Center me into the spiral of life, ever deeper, ever wiser, ever stronger, ever still, until all that is left is love. Prayer. I pray to remind me of my center, to remind me that I am connected, to still the space in my mind influenced by the externals of this wild world, to take back the peace that is mine. I pray to connect me to the place that reminds me of what matters, to the knowledge that this life is a gift. I pray to center my love so that I can send it to myself and another. I pray to remind myself that I don't know everything, that the mystery is flowing just as it always has and just as it always will, whether or not I see it. I pray so that I can remember who I really am, how sacred you are, we are. This moment is life. Thank you.